last for 1 or 2 years. So we liked these things. It is clear that when these things are discovered, that they are widespread, they are multiplied, thus raising the level of our lives, of our well-being. But what is the problem? We have never thought about the problem. What's next? What am I doing with that battery when it's down? What am I doing with all the smokes? And with the plastics, for example, if the plastics is poured in the sea, what will happen? So we need to see the immediate use of something. We need to check the advantages, but we also need to see the advantages of these products. The pandemic is an excellent example of this. In Asia, some viral forms have developed, such as SARS, that is the second disease in Sierra Leone in Africa that showed the dangers of a virus that affects the respiratory ways, and these viruses are particularly dangerous because they are airborne. They need men to be multiplied, but they are airborne because the air moves, there is the wind, there is our voice that bears them, that carries them. But what did we do when we found out that the level of dangers of these viruses? When the danger was over, we started to live like before. But only a few countries in Asia, South Korea and Taiwan, they treasured this experience, and they started the production when COVID-19 had not appeared yet. They started to produce ventilators, respiratory systems, and so they thought, okay, it's better to be ready if the virus will come back again. What is this? It's the idea of sustainability, is how to see over the immediate use of how we can challenge the change. And so what is the consequence? That in China, this virus made the Chinese lie. They didn't allow medical doctors to say something about this virus, and they told us that it was a mere lung disease. And before the COVID-19 reached South Korea, a group of researchers said that the masks allowed the masks to be used, the tracing systems had to be developed, and so we followed the Chinese strategy, and we were not ready, and so we decided for the lockdown. So while in South Korea and Taiwan, they followed a more intelligent strategy because it was focused on the future. First of all, masks. Secondly, tests. Third, tracing. For isolation. And so we did only lockdown. It was not particularly intelligent, and the cases of deaths in Taiwan were 6, in Korea 116, compared to what we experienced in Europe. And if you remember very well, despite all the government decisions and measures, we got the masks very late, and not nobody told our textile producers to change the production as it usually happens in a war system. Not to mention the test that, in fact, today we needed to stand up in a very long queue in Rome if you want to undergo a swab test. And this is the problem. But we knew this. We knew this, and we had to do something in order to prevent this from happening. The same thing is happening with the climatic change. We know very well that if we continue to burn carbon oil without being careful, if we keep on neglecting the environment, if we keep on polluting the environment, if we throw the plastics in the oceans, the fish will get sick, and then we will get sick as well. What does it mean? This means that we have to go beyond. We have to think about our generation. The issue of sustainability involves the next generation. Everybody has those who have nephews or nieces know that a person who was born in 2020, in 2050, this person will be 30. And 2050 is not so far, because our nephew who was born today, in 30 years will be 30. So under these conditions, it is not worth making the remark of the American comics, Groucho Marx, who said, I do not want to deal with next generation because this is amusing, but this is funny, but this is not like this. So the university that I am the president of, that is based in Venice and was remanded by Conforti, and Venezia is a very fragile environmental system because of the high waters, and these waters get higher and higher, and they get lower. So in these conditions, you cannot but remark the climate change, and we need to have a very careful behavior. So, Ambassador, can you see any changes in institutional policies? This is a very good question, because what we need to do is one of the conclusions we have to draw at the end of this conference. We are responsible. It's our responsibility. But what are we doing? And during a time when everybody talks about crisis, tensions between China and the United States, and many people wonder whether China will overcome the United States, and the United States and China will go through a conflict according to the famous trap of the Civita that says that when a powerful country sees that another country wants to overcome it, then the one country wanted to block the other powerful country. But in this case, neither China or the United States are powerful nations, because there is only one powerful nation, that is nature. As the previous moderator said, nature with this virus jeopardized not only one geographical region, not only one country like Russia, but the whole planet. And that is the the superpower we have to challenge. So if we change our attitude, I think that we are changing, because the public opinion wants to be more responsible, but it is not enough, because I must say that what the public authorities are doing, such as government institutions, multinationals, even if they do very important things, these things are not important. Like somebody who is on the boat and the water goes into the boat, and with a bucket we can pour the water out. We have water because we still have water. So what is the solution? The solution is only one solution: school. We need to make school and children the driving forces of this change. Children must be aware of their future, must protect their future, must safeguard their future. I would like children to learn how that when their parents leave their rooms, they have to tell their parents switch off the lights, or they can tell their mothers, look, the plastics cannot go with that other waste. So if we manage to make our children aware of their own future, and this is happening surprisingly in Japan, where the natural calamities, the hurricanes, the earthquakes are normal rule. Children learn when they are 3-year-old. Children know how to do when there is an earthquake. They go under the tables. They know that their future is at stake and is at risk. And I am impressed about what has been done in Matera, where the strength of change, because Matera won the candidacy as the European capital of culture, this let the environment be sensitive to the aesthetic aspects. Matera is a very attractive town that will continue to attract tourists, and so it will be an example to be followed. So territory and environment go together. The people who live on the territory must be responsible for that territory. But fortunately, thank God, this is a kind of mindset which is going to be widespread. For example, we always check the expiring date of food, and the same thing is for the environment, for the town. We have to check the deadlines and the expiration dates of everything, of people, of a new product. When we buy something, we need to think about what we have to do about the old things. And this is the idea of the economy that is being regenerated. An economy, a circular economy, where the resources are not spoiled because they must be reused. There is a little table in the room here that is made up of cardboard. This is a wonderful example. Why shall we throw away the cardboard that where there was a home appliance. We have to recycle it, we have to reuse it, because we have to respect nature, because nature is the real superpower. Otherwise, it will destroy us, as it has already done, in order to remind us at this time the basic rules of existence.
Ambassador Vattani relied on this awareness raising, personal and social awareness raising, which has increased all over the world. If we consider what is going on with our young people, a 16 years old Greta Thunberg, who started a mechanism which stimulates us to open our eyes on what we have been doing so far, and that we have to change our lifestyles. Before, a few considerations by President Conforti on these ongoing transformation aspects. I would like to recall that Greta Thunberg came to the spotlight in 2018, 26 years, after another 16 years old who took the floor in the first Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, 1992. If you have the chance of reading what Seven Khaled Suzuki said in 1992 and what Greta Thunberg started to say in 2018, well, they are practically the same words. In a long report aired by Rai Uno in July on the climate spiral, I wanted to add these two fragments in order to highlight that actually we are speaking about this issue, but we do not do enough about it, because 7 minutes by Stephen Khaled Suzuki were defined by my colleagues, journalists of Tempo magazine, the 6 minutes which annihilated the world. But did the world change later on under the point of view of political management of the responsibilities we have taken upon us in the light of the results, such as floods, viruses and fires? Well, we should admit that today we are facing a failure. So in 30 years, maybe another 16 years old will tell us, well, there is nothing else to do. We should consider positively what is going on around us. Living in terror, living by saying that everything is going wrong, also means that we are not able to change. Hence, change should be considered positively. If I listen to the statements of the young lady you mentioned before, well, something is true, but something is not true. Something is instrumental. So I do not agree. I do not agree completely with Greta Thunberg, because I consider her sort of a serial person, because she doesn't give us solutions. She just confronts herself with problems. Well, she's just 16 years old. She's just telling us, what are you doing? Well, yes, that's right, but I'm not talking negatively about her. I would like to rearrange the thought with an approach towards solutions, because we complain because we're not able to change, whereas if you have to plan a change, we should say, let's do this or that, let's work together. We should not blame somebody, we should look for solutions. So I'm sorry, I do not belong to the fans of this young lady, but I think the world is better managed with an important change, that is economic change. So economics needs a change, as Ambassador Battani said, because we are at a dead end, at a standstill for resources. So as a human being is rather greedy and doesn't care enough about what is surrounding him or her, so the human being realizes that when he or she is personally touched by that or involved or affected by that. So we need to change more, we have the need to change more than a philosophical wish towards a change. So there should be a revolution such as the Industrial Revolution, the Stone or Iron or Bronze Age Revolution. They came out of a need for change. So at this moment of history, sustainability in terms of company-related evolution and social evolution, well, I think they are actual needs for truth, because the era of unbreak consumerism is over, and now we are in favor of conservation, because it is a function of our survival, not just to be altruistic people or generous people. It is vital for our survival. When a climate revolution, a social and corporate revolution, turns out to be a booster towards the creation of well-being and not just a source for complaint, it turns out to be feasible. So a dogma should be confronted with the reality of needs. And I think there are big opportunities to teach people how to behave in a better way, to earn more, and to live all in a better way, to be more inclusive. That is the real meaning of the prize we awarded. That is putting forward proposals rather than complaining. Otherwise, everything will be done in vain if we do not make step forward, considering our possibilities to let the necessary change come true. I'd like to ask Mrs. Valenzano, what are the institutions making in order to be prepared in front of this new awareness, this new social conscience, these ethical instances, especially highlighted by our young people? I'd like to invite you, as a responsible person of the institutions of a very important region that is the leader of many initiatives at the European level. Well, I'd like you to illustrate how the institutions, which are so important at a local level, but also with a wider range, with the ability to have an actual role, to play an actual role even outside a regional size. Well, what are you planning in order to find a solution, considering what our young people are asking us? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank President Francesco Conforti and all the audience, the people who are here, for giving us the opportunity to illustrate our administrative path so far. I'd like to answer your question. Well, the region of Puglia has been selected among the European regions, and in the whole EU, as the leader for the drawing up of a draft which turned out to be a directive approved in June 2018 with the title A Clean Planet for All, the European strategy on the medium and long run, I mean between 20 and 30 years, even 40 years. So the European strategy for a prosperous, competitive, fair and climate neutral strategy. This considers all the environmental sustainability assets, that is, public policies which the countries of the European Union should enact in the field of factor aid, atmosphere emissions, that is the containment of these emissions, the so-called zero value, which is not actually a zero value, the maximum reduction of these values. Also with the harnessing of CO2, so Regione Puglia, instead of capture storage, that is capture of CO2 and the emission in the water and soil, we propose urban extraction, naturalistic techniques applied at an urban and non-urban scale for the general ecosystemic refurbishment of cities. And this is the first factor. Emission and industry, the application of the best available techniques for the containment of these factors, so that technology can be helpful in order to contain these factors. Just an example to show you the power of this technology. Technology allows you, well, I have a clean source which is propane, the classical gas we use in lighters, then metal, so the propane heats the metal, a spoon or whatever, and then there is a black smoke. These are hydrocarbons. So how can a clean source give a combustion product which is contaminated because hydrocarbons are carcinogenic? Well, that is combustion, that is burning. What do? I have to utilize a clean process. I have to eliminate the flame front for combustion. I use a hyperbaric process, thus removing the flame front. So if I use technology between these two mechanisms, I will have zero emissions without any black. So this was very simple, but actually this is technologically viable. This is our aim. So minimization of the emissions in the atmosphere, in the soil, in the process of the various applied industrial processes. Well, in the case of Apulia, they have environmental problems connected with considerable industrial facilities. The biggest steel industry in Europe is in Taranto, in Apulia, which is still active. So it is an active source of pollution, one of the biggest carbon plants in Europe, in Brindisi. So this region has made many attempts over the last few years to solve the problem. Well, considering these examples, what do you think that can be actually be done besides general reasoning? How can you translate these technological possibilities in order to have a real innovation of processes, thus eliminating pollution sources? Well, this was the perfect question. Well, we tried technically to apply we wanted to adopt the principles of the directive that was approved in June 2018. So the first big problem was the Cerano power plant and Ilva steel industry. About the Cerano power plant, along with the Ministry for Environment, we asked to switch off to eliminate all the coal-related combustion stage by replacing it with an innovative system, thus obtaining a green power plant, and we are approaching the politics of Advantage.green. Actually, Enel accepted our suggestion, and the power plant is being switched off with a refurbishment, a regeneration in this kind of industry. And now they will submit a new business plan that will allow to have a production. Region Apulia is presently exporting 80% of energy, so we want to go on exporting, but we want to export in a sustainable way. We want that product is not the product of a coal-fed power plant with very strong emissions in terms of heavy metals, aromatic polycyclic hydrocarbons, and so on. Enel accepted the policies of the region Apulia supported by the Ministry of Environment. Now we are presently switching off this power plant. Within 2021, all the turbines will be switched off and will be refurbished. As for the Ilva steel industry, well, the region Apulia submitted a plan to DG with the director Bonchart in Brussels. We submitted a new plan that was approved by the European Union, and they wanted to allocate considerable and remarkable resources for the refurbishment of the steel industry. Well, the principle of functioning is shifting from fossil sources such as coal to hydrogen. Hydrogen is a completely clean source accompanied with an innovation process. We mean that we're going to use hydrogen in order to produce steel, which is high quality steel, and not the steel which is presently produced in Taranto, which is out of the market because its quality is not so high. The Ilva company over the last 5-6 years lost its most important customers, such as Fiat or Snam, because the steel has not got a sufficient quality. I mean that the quality of the product should go hand in hand with the quality of the environment. If I produce in a sustainable way by means of cutting-edge technologies in a controlled system, I will also have a process that will be competitive on the market. For example, there are some Italian companies which have got a program know-how which is highly appreciated, or even in the United States. They use an industrial process devised in Italy to produce carbon dioxide to produce Coke, and we drink Coca-Cola with the CO2 produced by a plant in Mexico with an Italian technology. So we are exporting that, and in Italy we have to adopt that technology. So we should eliminate the part of process relating to coal or hybrid system because gas is a fossil source. And this will allow us to eliminate that part of the production process in the case of the steel industry or all other kinds of industries containing dusts with heavy metals, which are carcinogenic agents, hydrocarbons. We will eliminate the agglomeration of fossil elements with the furans, dioxins, and so on. We will eliminate coke production, considering benzopyrene, benzofluorantine, which are all carcinogenic elements with a very high reach of carcinogenic power. They are very hazardous for our health. We're also suggesting evaluations of health-related impact for that. There are all risk assessment procedures that allow us to understand which is the tolerable limit for that hazard that a natural system might contain or absorb. Which is this threshold, this limit? We cannot cancel everything. We've got cities, we've got anthropic, man-related systems. So we should understand which is the threshold by means of environmental and health-related risk assessments in order to understand which is the threshold. This is our effort as engineers, as experts. We should apply the systems on a natural scale, environmental scale, also considering the landscape which belongs to the environment, and so the quality of life connected with the possibility of being able to use landscape as well can help us to live better. So the lifestyle will play a fundamental role also for the health and for the mental well-being of people. Mrs. Valenzano, over the last few years, Mrs. Valenzano is still playing a crucial role in the management of particularly problematic areas such as the industrial area of Taranto, the iron producing, steel producing area, and she knows the subject very well, very thoroughly, and she mentioned that technology nowadays is offering solutions so that a high quality production of steel can be made compatible with the environment without killing anybody or without poisoning the citizens or the workers and so on. Considering her institutional experience, because she is a high manager of Region Apulia, well, according to your experience, what has been the main obstacle in going towards that purpose, that aim, that achievement? Because over the last few months, where we experienced a sort of fight without any result with the present owners of the steel company, who tried to withdraw by saying that there was no profitability, no more actual conditions to go on. So what is the main obstacle towards the actual enactment of these measures in order to pave the way towards new and more interesting industrial perspectives than in the past? Well, since 2012, I have a role that puts me in contact with that kind of industry. The economic data are that that company has a loss of 40 million euros per month, whereas the productive part of that system connected with the old owners of the plant, that is the transport of raw materials, is still active and profitable. So we should wonder, what is the real drama? Haven't we got any real industrial plan at a national level considering steel production industries? So we should not avail ourselves of an old law in 1942 mentioning a law that defined that plant as a strategic plant for the production of weapons for the war at the time. So nowadays we haven't got that need any longer. In the microphone, please, otherwise we cannot translate. Microfono. So we have the owner of an industry, ArcelorMittal. They're actually French, not Indian. The French have never a minority associate. So this particular story of Ilva in Italy with very obsolete laws. Well, why shouldn't that be a European problem? As we are talking of European steel, we always refer to the EU, whereas responsibilities only pertain to the Italians. Well, French people purchased that company. We financed, gave financial backing to that purchase. So the problem is not only an Italian problem that pertains to Europe. That is not merely an Italian problem, such as the problem of migrations and so on. So I apologize, as I am very strict for that. Well, a few minutes ago I said that Region Apulia suggested a plan in Brussels in order to allow an integral refurbishment of the steel industry. That plan was accepted positively by DG Klein with Director Bouchard, and they were ready to give financial backing for that. So the problem of the Ilva crisis was triggered together with the problem of Calais, the plant of Calais in France. So Calais went on with other procedures, whereas in Italy, due to internal governmental problems, we had another pathway. So unfortunately, the connection between government, Europe and regional governments has been missing. So a law is not enough. It is against local interests, against general strategic European interests. Taranto today is a European city. It is not the old Italian city that produced iron. So what are we going to do in Italy? You can produce steel, smart or special steel in Italy for prostheses, for ortheses, with small amounts, with 500,000 of tons per year, having a very high quality, because in Italy you have the know-how to produce amazing materials. So the material you produce there with a lower quality, if you want to go on with that production, well, that material will not be requested any longer. We have titanium now. So if you really want to produce that kind of lower quality material by means of fossil fuels and so on, you can do that connected with caves and mines in Mongolia, in China, with lower expenses, lower production expenses. So you have to redesign your production according to this world assets. Well, Mr. Ambassador, you were stimulated by these remarks. I'd like to thank Councillor Valenzano very much indeed for what she said, because she highlighted, and this is one of the merits of this platform, Advantage.green, because it allows to start a dialogue between people carrying responsibilities, as in her case, in the region of Puglia, one of the most important regions in Italy, and maybe the Academy and those who follow these kinds of issues will be interested in that. The councillor highlighted some very positive aspects in that field, that is the improvement in the atmosphere, in the air, afforestation, which is a very positive aspect. In Italy, we should follow the example of Apulia. Secondly, a critical assessment of what is polluting the air. You mentioned the power plant in Brindisi and the steel industry in Taranto, and you mentioned the problem of energy production, hydrogen. This is a topic on which we are investing a lot in Venice, because if you do not set up a platform for the production and stocking, you cannot use hydrogen. And we are cutting edge on that, because we convinced the mayor, Luigi Brugnaro, mayor of Venice, to sign an agreement with Eni in order to set up a hydrogen platform there. I mentioned Venice because between Venice and Bari, since the 13th century, there has always been a great alliance. In the 13th century, Bari was sieged by the Saracens, and the Doge, Orseolo II, came to Bari with 100 ships. And when the inhabitants of Bari saw the Venetian fleet, this huge fleet heading towards Bari, they shouted, "We can see them, we can see them." And in Bari, they still celebrate this old historical event tracing back to 800 years ago. Microfono per cortesia. Microfono. The microphone, please. Without the microphone, we cannot translate. One of the big actors in the production cycle, well, I'd like to listen to your opinion about Taranto more than on Bari, because it is a highly qualified opinion, besides being one of the actors of the activities of Advantage.green. Because considering what Mrs. Valenzano said, I think your contribution will be crucial for our discussion in order to consider this virtuous circuit of thought. Yes, I wanted to highlight that I'm going to complete my remarks. We want you to take the floor, hopefully with the microphone. I'd like to thank you, to thank all the speakers of this wonderful round table. I would like to thank Francesco Conforti of Advantage.green. And the topics we are dealing with are really very interesting, and it is right to deal with them in all kinds of conferences and events. As President Conforti was saying, I do not live in Taranto, but as I work at the Ionian Department of the Bari University, we founded 10 years ago with Professor Antonio Uricchio, who was the dean in the juridical department. And then there was a new reform in education in Italy with the closing of some decentralized headquarters of universities, and we decided to double our effort in Taranto, and then we set up an Ionian department for economics and law with a particular hint towards environmental issues. I am a professor of good sciences. Mr. Uricchio has always dealt with circular tax system under all the perspectives of law, public law, contract law, comparative law, and so on. And so I experience the reality of Taranto 3 times a week. I'm always near that steel industry in Taranto. I can see what is changing or does not change there, because at the end of the day, steel is produced in Taranto according to a system used in the first industrial revolution. So the shift towards the agglomeration phase, the agglomeration of cast iron in the furnaces. Well, it was the old system adopted in the old industrial revolution with fossil coal transformed into coke, and steel that fed the textile industry in Manchester, the industry of power plants that were set up at the time. But just a little has changed in Taranto. As for the production cycle, there have been some technological improvements with an improvement of the end product, but not enough has been done for considering the environmental issues. The former government, Nikita Vendola, tried to cope with this kind of problem with urea plants for the abatement of dioxide, and with Governor Emiliano, a lot has been done in order to cope with this problem, which is still affecting our city, and which is a very serious problem. We have covered the mineral parks, but the production cycle has still got a high intensity of benzopyrene emissions, So emissions into the atmosphere, we should focus our attention onto this kind of emissions. I remember there were some decarbonization projects for Ilva. Hydrogen is a better perspective because the hydrogen as a vector is the cleanest vector possible, but we should make a reasoning considering a hydrogen platform, a different way to make calculations, as environmental impact and sustainability should be measured according to quantitative tools. And these tools should tell us if I want to produce hydrogen, I need a lot of electric energy, so I should find a clean way to produce hydrogen. Otherwise, we run the risk of having an energy, H2O, for example, energy that calls for a high amount of electric energy, but that should be produced by means of renewable sources in order to close a virtuous cycle, in order to minimize pollution. If we do not act that way, we would not be allowed to use the so-called recovery fund in our future, for future generations. Hydrogen is a very interesting perspective if we produce it through modern platforms by means of clean energy. Otherwise, the circuit will not be virtuous. And before you said that in Taranto, recently they did not accept that taboo any longer about the Ilva industry. The first attempts were made by Governor Vendola, but up to that moment, and we are referring to 2005, 2006 or 2007, well, up to that moment, in the city of Taranto, there were no public devices to measure atmospheric pollution. I heard witnesses by public administrators, engineers. So how did they transmit this data to Bari? Well, there was a man who went there and just said, well, today we had a cloud, a purple cloud. Today we had a yellow cloud. That's it. Well, it seems a joke. It seems that we are joking, but this actually happened up to a few years ago. We are referring to a situation that is backward within this framework. Well, it is a national problem because all the regional agencies for environmental production in Italy, which are the official bodies that have to monitor the emissions, were founded in 2001. Actually, they were called ARPA then. They were systems implemented between 2002 and 2003, and I worked for them at the time. So these monitoring networks started functioning then, and then in 2004 we started monitoring emissions in the atmosphere with the so-called external control. You were mentioning the control of H- emissions, the macro-polluting emissions. Well, at the time, they took the data, they were extracted from the system, and they were not controlled. They were just conveyed to Bari. Over the last few years, we connected all the data that were monitored, and then they were conveyed to one single center. Today, we have the need and the actual possibility to go beyond this heavy legacy of the past. And I'd like to ask Professor Montarnicola how does your department work in order to measure the footprint, the ecological footprint produced by the goods we use as consumers? So how can we, considering the prior experience, which such a negative experience relating to this history, to these industries, how can we come to terms with this new request for clean products with more modern and healthy conditions in order to recover what we can recover within this circular view of economics, goods and production processes?
Well, the approaches we are focusing on with our students and our research are plant approaches and approaches of products and services. The production sites are those that were followed by the region of Puglia with a particular law starting from an inventory of the pollutants of that production sites, and that we have the dispersion of pollutants in order to understand where they go to, and then we try to understand the pollutant and the level of pollutant and the probability they can bring out other diseases. But the approaches on products is a little bit different because it relies on the idea of the product cycle, of the life cycle of a product that is characterized by many phases. That is to say, the supply of raw materials, the raw materials that will be purchased from this production plant, and then the product will be produced, and then the product will be used and disposed of. So the life cycle is not the production cycle, it's the whole life cycle that starts with the extraction of raw materials, energy, fossil fuels, iron, minerals, biomasses, and goes through the life cycles of the other products, and then we use them, and then we dispose of them. And so it's important to understand which are the environmental impact, because as for some goods, we focus on production, but it is important to focus on the use as for particular kinds of goods, because it's important to understand how the consumer uses that good in order to assess the environmental impact. Also, the impact on the environment is very important. Also, the waste disposal is very important. We have to understand how to recover the waste in order to increase the cycle level of the product. So we need to think in terms of life cycle management, and European Union has been insisting on this since 1991 when they introduced the eco-label, because the products needed to undergo LCA studies in order to understand the criteria of the maximum level of polluting of that product, because a washing machine shall have a certain kind of consumption that is not higher than kilowatt hours, or a consumption not higher than 5 liters per water for 1 kilo of laundry, or the waste disposal phase that must recycle all the components by 50%. So we introduced the life cycle of our products products that was followed by other European laws like Ecolabel 2 and 3, but I also referred to DAP, that is the environmental statement of products that we can find in many consumption products. That is an environmental report. They say that, for example, the biscuits by Mulino Bianco, they tell us how much greenhouse gases are produced, how many toxic gases are produced, or are there any kind of substances that can be very dangerous. So these measurement systems, LCA, in Italy we have the Italian network of LCA. I am the president of since last year. That is a network set up by universities and research centers, and they encourage and disseminate the methodology of LSA through the production companies, but also through public institutions. Through this methodology, we can quantify, but we can give some figures, objective figures, relying on a standardized methodology by ISO standards that let us say that our product has this kind of environmental impact, accounting for 3.2. Your product, like for example spaghetti, olive oil, or for example components for turbines, or any kind of product, has this kind of environmental report equal to 1.3. What are the causes of this impact? What are the polluting factor of this product? And what the designer can do by using technology, as the ladies were saying, in order to minimize this environmental impact. We have environmental technologies because man is able to reduce the environmental impact in the same ways as he succeeded in going to the moon. And so we need to reduce the environmental impact by 37%. And today, for example, we can cope with this challenge. We can take this challenge, and the pandemic let us understand that sustainability is very important to us, and we have to take into account. Potete parlare nel microfono? Can you speak into the microphone, please? Il microfono? We cannot translate. I'm sorry if you don't speak into the microphone. Of course. Well, when we met the first time with Francesco, with Antonio Riccio, we were thinking about a proposal by Francesco. We wanted to sell on the platform Advantage.green environmentally friendly products. So Francesco wanted us to give them a tool to measure the environmental friendliness of these products. So we tried to understand which were the products to be sold on this platform. We applied the LSCA methodology to give some indicators of this product in order to create a range between maximum and minimum level within which the products must be included, and then we saw all the products that has the NPD, which is the environmental declaration of products, in order to see how they were based in that environmental range, in order to give the thresholds of environmental levels that the product on the platform had to abide by. And in this way we could give a virtuous benchmarking. This is really interesting and important because over the last few years we experienced demand by the consumers who want to be informed, because because we needed to check the expiration dates, but we also needed to understand which are the production processes of that particular product and whether that production process is environmentally friendly. So this is our attitude that is increasing, fortunately, and this is strategic, and this matching with science, technology, and production is very important in order to give producers the possibility to make the right and profitable choices, and on the other hand, consumers can be more aware when they choose some particular products or tools for his or her daily life, which are more consistent with a vision of life that is changing. And so, also, we have different reference points. And in the light of your experience, what has been highlighted, and your work has been really important, the work you carried out with Advantage.green, because it is very important to understand what progress we made. The companies were started before, and that started some quality systems like ISO 9001, and then ISO 14001, and then greenhouse gases. So those companies, multinational companies, Italian companies, have a very competitive advantages compared to other companies that do not have any tools, do not have dealt with environmental issues. They do not know that when we switch on the light, we are having an environmental impact that is produced in Girevoli, where the electric energy is produced. But of course, it's the company that is switching on the light that is responsible for that environmental impact. So we need all the tools in order to reduce the environmental impact. So we need new production chains, and our SMEs that are also virtuous in production must undertake this kind of methodology, and they need some laws that allow them to undertake this method. So I think that we can use this 36% of recovery fund of a green economy that are really significant and important resources. So the ambassador was the predecessor of a very important movement in Italy, and was the first person to use to create in Italy the stocking system in Marghera, because I think that you did something that is very important, like, for example, the collection of art for Farnesina. You have always been a forerunner of many important things. I am very proud of that I was with you when this was announced in Venice last year. Yes, it was started by other companies, and so we started from producing the hydrogen, and we started from companies that manage the waste treatment, and I would like to congratulate him because he talked about a reform of the university, and the reforms of universities And this is something I was told. Reforming, changing the university is like changing the cemetery, because it is not easy at all, and the people who work inside the university do not help you at all. And so I am really surprised, because you succeeded in doing this, in changing the university. And we talked about air, and this is a very important topic as for air pollution, and we are very proud of this. We who live in the south of Italy, because we have the winds, we have a very narrow country that is Italy, that is surrounded by the seas. We talked about energy. This is good. And thirdly, we talked about this kind of labeling of products that indicate not only the expiration dates, as we reminded, but also the quality as for environmentally friendliness of these products. And Advantage.green has always paved the way, and what Advantage.green has done has been very encouraging, because we do not have to say you are polluting, you are making mistakes. We must suggest how to improve. We do not have to discourage people, because we need to suggest solutions to people. And Advantage.green is an incentive, because it's saying that you are doing very well, but if you can do better, you will be on a platform, and your product will be more competitive. It will have an added value compared to other products. And then I will move back to what the lady has just said. Is it possible that we Italians is the Renaissance who were able to realize things that other people couldn't make? The velvets of Geneva, for example, the floors, everything is concerned with architecture. If you have a look around in Matera, for example, you can have a vision of it. And we could set up very important steel industries. Everybody has a steel watch, but how much steel does that watch use? A very small quantity, but how much is a watch compared to an iron rod? So we have to continue to produce steel in the same ways as it was done in Brussels or in other European parts. And so I congratulate with the region, like for example the region of Puglia, that succeeded in changing these production methods, and also the regional council of Emiliano managed to do this. But how come we didn't manage to do this all over the world? Because despite all our efforts, we do not deal with these issues in a consistent way. We are not engaged in these issues compared to the other European partners, European countries. If we had fought for this, we need to make this happen every day. We have to fight for this. We need to be constant. So if there is a representative in Brussels who is very keen on this, it doesn't miss the opportunity to boost the reasons why something can happen, and they take advantage of this. So I have to interrupt you because we have Mrs. Vicky. As Mr. Conforti reminded us, you are the member of the board of directors of UniCredit, and It is the most important representative, and she knows very well the sharing markets and also the financial market. And she gave financial judgments for many companies in the stock exchange market. So the levels of store of the accountability, Maria has been the forerunner in this country, in the Mediterranean area, and also in the United States, where she lived for a long time. So I think that she's the best person who can tell us how we can make the right choices, looking at the future, in order to support the economic activities, production activities that allow us to cope with the climate change, the social crisis, unemployment, thereby changing step by step the development model that has triggered the problems we are coping with nowadays. So can you tell us something so that we can develop our debate? Good morning, everybody. I am very sorry of not being here there in Matera. Last year we had a very important, very wonderful meeting. I would like to thank Fondazione Advantage and Mr. Conforti for giving me the opportunity to participate in these important meetings on sustainability and economic sustainability, because these are important issues. But I also follow these topics with a lot of interest, because this is a very urgent topic due also to the pandemic. We are focusing on sustainability more and more, but companies are trying to meet the needs and the rules in order to discipline the environmental issue. The topic nowadays is more included in the strategies of companies. The pandemic has had very serious effects on business models. It has created an emergency situation that has forced companies to give rapid answers, not only as for the management of relationship with the consumers, but also with employees that had to work in different conditions, and with all the territories and stakeholders. So I would say that one of the big changes we experienced over the last few years is an increasing awareness of stakeholders. You know that the companies include the stakeholders within the objectives of companies who do not work for shareholders, but they do have to take into account that the stakeholders, and this is taken into consideration by the Italian law, that includes sustainability, the sustainability success within the company framework. So we now have to take into account that there are some risks that need to be managed and monitored in a very thorough way. So the pandemic is considered as one of the significant and expected risks of companies that requires a lot of emergency actions to be undertaken by some companies. Although although some companies were not ready to manage some these risks and to manage the impact of these risks on the business. And in the medium run, it was a very important risk. So the relationship with the stakeholders, I would say that as we need to do something immediately so that the stakeholders and shareholders could have a more fluid relationship with the companies, for example, donations or the structures that gave a more immediate answer to the pandemic. So the relationship with our employees, you talked a lot about environment, and I wanted to talk about social capital and the governance, the S and the G of the ISG factors, social capital, so the employees who experience the impact of this crisis, although we cannot go over it, and the working conditions have completely changed because the smart working has increased a lot, and this has created a new model of working, a new way of engaging people, so a new way of smart working and not only remote working, and a new way of setting up a dialogue, of communicating with the people, because there was a reduction in wages, and it was important to motivate employees, to train them more and more, to think about more sustainable companies from the point of view of the managing of the human capital. The companies are trying to include these factors in their strategies. They have to attract talents, but also they need to train employees in order to give more importance to the balance between work and life. So the motivation linked to the purpose of the company, because over the last few years or months we have talked about the business purpose. This topic was launched in the United States in the beginning of the year, but many companies and European companies and organizations had been talking about it a lot in the past few years, and also investors are interested in this. Another important stakeholder are the institutional investors. Francesco referred to the stock markets, and the companies are involved in stock markets. They are held by institutional investors, by very important insurance companies that nowadays require sustainable sustainable behavior for companies. So we tried to implement sustainable projects, but how can we choose these companies? What are the choices of investors? How can they be selected in order to be appealing for the investors? So, Mrs. Pedicchi, how can we identify, how will you identify, will you manage to identify the companies that...
Però senza microfono ci sono difficoltà di comunicazione, peraltro a distanza.
How can we identify the companies? I will tell you how to do that, because Advantage.green has a scoring model that is an integrated model between what are the financial statements and the non-financial disclosures, which is a model that we take into account all sustainability activities with all economic benchmarks, and it has a period of 8 years that was assigned with Pricewaterhouse, which is a world company, leading world companies, and we sent joint relation businesses, and that indicates there's a kind of indicators, benchmarks that are included in the European community and the American community, and also in the United Nations community. This is a quantitative model. So President Mr. Conforti went beyond, went forward also. His work is very useful for you as well. There is the transparency of information, because companies must stick to these transparency regulations and non-financial disclosures. So the non-financial benchmarks, they have financial data that come much before financial data, because they include all indicators of environmental, social, governance impact that are significant for the middle-term performance of the company objectives that are monitored with financial disclosures. And this is the third year of the research on the DNF in Italy that is given signs of a more detailed reporting, because we cannot, we need to have a good reporting. So the investors need this kind of detailed reporting in order to make the right choices. So we need reference models, independent models, like, for example, consulting companies that can check these benchmarks, compare these benchmarks of the companies working in the same sector, because each sector has its own dynamics which are important, and within this they carry out ratings that the investors can use when they make their own choices. And these tools are very important, especially when we have a lot of data and we have the similar data, and the European international authorities are creating common standards so that environmental impact and the good governance can be assessed and traced in a very homogeneous way, so that investors can share the same language and the same capacity to choose the companies of different sectors of different countries. This is a very hard effort, because it includes a lot of benchmarks, a lot of measurements of intangible factors, like, for example, intangible assets that companies have, and that have an impact on the social capital, environmental capital. And so the topic is really complex and difficult. So as for climate change, that is one of the most important aspects of sustainability, that is the impact of the companies on the environmental impact, and how it encourages new practices for the energy transition in the sector where it operates. This is a field we made a lot of progress as for recommendations, as for rules and regulations, and nowadays companies are implementing them. With the pandemic, we speed up our climate change process, because it was one of the most driving factors of this terrible crisis. And also the widespread dissemination of the virus is linked to the bad use of the environment and to the climate change, but also because it was very important for consumers as investors, and companies cannot neglect this, otherwise they will not survive anymore. So Just to conclude, I would like to say that the risk of energy transition that must be mapped, and we have to take into account in credit policies, in the way we do business. So we have to take into account the risk of energy transition of the subjects who use some products, and the physical risk. Let's think about those factors of risks that have an impact on buildings, on the assets that the bank takes and considers as an element of financial credibility. And so, due to the crisis, this issue is a very urgent issue, and so we need to take the challenge in order to manage it. But the investors are a very important element of dialogue and discussion, and they are very important. So you were talking about this process of energy transition, and there is a concern. I think that we have a risk of the greenwashing, like the green paint on the old production processes. As we were saying before when talking about the hydrogen production process, if we produce it with fossil fuels, so we are not making any step forward. So which is the risk of this? What is the risk of greenwashing? If there is a risk of greenwashing, of course there is a risk of greenwashing. The problem is that, of course, the rules and the laws are helping this capacity to be less superficial when dealing with this topic, but we need to make a distinction between the communication and what a company does actually. So we need to see the accounting of the company. So the consumer, as we were saying before, plays a crucial role, because I cannot work in fashion with sustainable cotton, but we need to see the supply chain that is in discussion. This is a question that nowadays, and the dependency of companies on production chain, on supply chain, is very important. So a company must not only make its production sustainable according to specific parameters, but it must guarantee that the production method of suppliers must be sustainable, and so it shall impose some choices, because it shall help the suppliers to use sustainable raw materials or sustainable production methods, so that they can undertake sustainable policies within the community they work in. So, for example, they need to improve working conditions rather than being involved in a juvenile job, in minor jobs. So it is important to control this chain. And this is not only greenwashing, it's a question of changing the model. So nowadays, data and facts will make the difference. And greenwashing will help us to widespread this method, also among the small producers who are not open to sustainable. Small producers have disappeared with the pandemic because sustainability was not a priority for them. Survival was the priority for them. So it is important to make research on sustainability more pervasive. Let's think about Matera. Matera is a small town who managed to handle a tourist and cultural flow in a very sustainable way, entering the small realities of hotels or of restaurants. So we shall try and implement this process. We shall focus on the consumers, on local communities, rather than on investors, because the municipalities, our governments can help us in following this process, setting up dialogues with the local communities in order to make progress and make steps forward in this direction. If we want to launch tourism, we have to focus on art, because we know that Italy boasts artistic heritage that is very important. So we need to protect Venice from tourists to destroy them, but we need to enhance and protect the town as well. I would like to thank you a lot also, because it's very difficult to set up a dialogue at a distance, but I would like to underline this. I interviewed many experts, many people on these issues, and I see the difference, I caught the difference. There is something more that women add to these issues. And I would like to say that without President of the European Council, who is a woman like von der Leyen, we may not have had this kind of development that we have had over the last few months, because the male tradition of coping with situations using the old parameters has a significant and bad impact. So I would like you to applaud to our Mrs. Pierdicchi, and we are not talking about, we are talking about a special person. Regardless of everything, I have to say you goodbye now, because there is another important person now, and who is Mrs. Cecilia De Re, who is the counselor at the Environmental Department at the municipality of Florence. I think that the women sensitiveness had played a crucial role over the past few years. We set up a team, and we have to work harder together in order to have a good result. Thank you very much. And so the Councillor Del Re left his institutional task to participate in our discussion and make us understand how a town that is very important in the world, like the town of Florence, she is trying and making sustainable some choices of daily life of Florence, and these are the tasks for municipality. Good morning. I would like to thank the Fondazione Advantage and Mr. Conforti for inviting me to this important and interesting conference on sustainability that is an important issue also for local governments. It has been very important over the last few years. And after the pandemic, this issue has become very important. Our task force is engaging in these issues because it is very important to change the model of development, to change the approach to the environment and to the urban context. We are active on many fields. We are working on environmental sustainability, and we are participating in several projects with other environmentally friendly projects with other European countries, but also with other Italian towns. So our sustainable development goals are very important to us and for our program. And one of the most important objectives of Agenda 2020 is the equal opportunity. And we need to have sustainable development for our territories. So the municipality of Florence is one of the most important towns that has introduced these indicators of equitable and sustainable well-being. So it is important to monitor the trend of these benchmarks as the benchmarks of well-being. So Venice was one of the first municipalities, Florence was one of the first municipalities that joined the Covenant of Mayors for Sustainable Energy in 2010, and it took into account the emissions of 2005, and Florence overcame the objective of 20% of emissions forecast in 2020 because now we achieved less than 30% of CO2 emissions by 2020. So we replaced the public lights with the LED lights, and now we are active on the Covenant of Mayors on Energy and Climate that we signed in 2017 that set out the objective of reducing emissions by 40%, strengthening resilience to climate change by 2040. And we are also trying to change our urban plan because we will have a participated plan for the new operational plan, so we will have the same partnership, so we will encourage the less use of the soil. So the new model of a circular town and urban town will be very important. As for energy efficiency, we are following the incentives, we are using the incentives promoted by the government. So we used the facade bonus, but we also tried to introduce other energy efficiency projects for facades and roofs, and also we tried to introduce smart building methods for 300 houses. At the same time, we are working to adopt the plan on the green areas of the town of Florence. This was not a mandatory tool, but the climate change, environmental challenges are very important to us, and therefore we decided to adopt this measure, and Professor Stefano Mancuso will be with us, will follow us with the Academy of Florence and the CNR, and they will help us in mitigating the isle of heat so that we can introduce new green areas and we can have vertical walls, and we have already started to build the new vertical green walls in schools in order to raise awareness of children. And another important objective is the urban forestation, because we want to plant 15,000 new trees in towns, and we also have promoted a project called Give a Tree, Donate a Tree, so that everybody can choose where to plant a tree and donate it to the town of Florence, dedicating to a loved one. And so this is a very important project that aims at urban forestation, and it's been very successful. How we plant trees according to sustainable methods, so we need to guarantee green areas. So thanks to European projects, we are experimenting project of smart irrigation. We allow to save 30% of water per year, and this is very important because natural resources are not very much, are depleting, and we need to use them in a rational way. And so we will install sensors in order to check and to monitor when the soil needs to be watered and irrigated. So we will have an automatic irrigation system that will start only when it is necessary in order to save this percentage of water per year in the view of sustainability of the urban context that will be increasingly greener. When we talk about sustainability, we have to take into account the issue of the topic of waste of the circular town. Next week, Florence will launch the new waste plant that will be made up of two kinds of programs, door-to-door collection, and the other ones that will have smart waste bins that will monitor the separate waste collection that is carried out by citizens. So we will have a system that will make the user more responsible through a correct separate waste collection, so that this waste can be introduced in a virtuous system, because in Florence, over the last few years, we have created some systems of recycling glass, plastics and paper that gave us the possibility to create some jobs within the circular economy. When we talk about waste, we do not only talk about increasing the percentage of separate waste collection, but also to reduce the waste production. So as a town, we join the program of single-use plastic, and we are implementing a series of actions going towards this direction, like, for example, the introduction of systems for rational distribution of water, the distribution of plastic bottles in schools, but also the forks or dishes that can be reused by people. The last plan we are working on is the air quality, because, as you said before, the problem of air pollution is very crucial, and we have to cope with it in the next following years. COVID-19 was spread in the areas where air quality was very bad, and it was spread less where air quality was better. And air pollution is not due only to mobility, but also from the boilers, because in Florence we have obsolete boilers, so we will introduce some bonuses in order to replace the old boilers with the new energy efficient boilers in order to improve air quality. Of course, the topic of mobility is very important for our town, and we did a lot as for public transport. We improved our tram lines. We are starting new working sites for improving tram lines, and Florence was one of the first towns who experimented the lines of electric cabs with some electrical charging points that allow to have an electric taxi fleet, so that we can multiply the electric cabs, so that all taxis in Florence will have zero emissions. So as for mobility, we are working on the Green Shield, as other towns are doing, in order to have a vehicle access for different kinds of payments according to the origin of the vehicle. And so we would like to reduce traffic in Florence, because in Florence we have 400,000 inhabitants and tourists as well. That, of course, has some impact on the life of our town and on the air quality of our town. I will conclude by saying that when we talk about sustainability, environmental sustainability, technology helps us and will help us to implement and achieve these objectives. I talked about smart irrigation in order to make the use of water more efficient. The electronic waste bin will also be very important in order to monitor the way the citizens make the separate waste collection. So we are trying to have a smart city with an integrated plan, so that we can take the challenges that the pandemic as a cause. Thank you, Mrs. Dere. While you were talking, Mrs. Valenzano was noticing how these good practices you have been talking about are included in this European protocol. The region of Puglia has worked on as a leader. Can you please explain to us this covenant of mayors that shall help you implement these policies? Actually, we, as a leader, we joined the Covenant of Mayors, who is a European network that develops the environmental policies as for emissions and waste. We have been talking about connected to the application of the European laws as for the Covenant of Mayors, with all the public policies aiming at reducing reducing the environmental impact. So we adopted an electric system of transport in our town. So we are experimenting the use of hydrogen with some companies on public means of transport, but without accumulation. So we are implementing a direct use. That is to say, there is direct emissions. You know that we have a 3.75% of the exposition of hydrogen. So we need to minimize stock and immediate use. So we are shifting from a hybrid system, but you need to produce energy and in another part. So we wanted to go further, and so we are trying to fund this kind of actions on research and prototypes that we would like to implement on an ordinary basis in the following 5 years. And we have to achieve two objectives. The first one is linked to the funding, because companies need fundings in order to change their view, and we asked this to the COP25. Europe has already given some financial resources. And the other very important thing is that the European Financial Union, it is not enough to have a monetary union. We need to have a financial union, because in this way we have a social equity within Europe, and in this way we will not undergo derating, declassifying phase, because these rating companies consider the government instability, because there is not a rating, a standard rating, in order to assess the government instability. So we need to consider the debt. We have gross debt rate, because households have debt. So we need benchmarks, and we need to take them in consideration within a European community. Politicians speak about euro yes, euro no. We need a European financial union, and also the methods of joining these financial measures, because we need to have a real social cohesion, a production cohesion. So, when we listened to Mrs. Dere, we realized that we started a shift as for the material application that goes over the generational shift, so that we can change the direction of our actions. And this is very good, because this gives us the possibility to do something, as the region of Apulia has started to do. So we have half an hour for our morning session. So I would like to listen to you in order to think about the concrete and real initiatives that we can implement and we need to make citizens participate in the purchasing of products through the transparencies of processes. They need to have the awareness, the responsibility of a very good separate waste collection. So I want to think about it. I want to open a discussion about it. So the economy has thought about the nature of value, but it has not taken into account the value of nature. We have started to do it, Mr. Professor Notar Nicola, and so how can we implement these new positive practices in order to make a step further, because we can build up a new economy, an effective green economy, getting rid of screwed people, as Mrs. Pedicchio reminded us. Otherwise, we are missing a very good opportunity. And we have and Europe is looking at us. Europe is very important to us because in the light of the pandemic, in the light of what the pandemic has triggered, we can say that we are lucky that Europe is here. So I give the floor to the professor and then to the ambassador.
Thank you. Sustainability is a path which should not be neglected at all. National, regional, local governments, and even single consumers should get along that pathway. It's important to be as one. I am referring to the attitude, behavior of all countries. If some countries go towards the opposite direction because they still question climate change and they doubt about climate change or concepts such as decarbonization, the need to decarbonize, to eliminate fossil fuels, to eliminate coal and the derivatives of oil. I don't know what we are talking about. The strongest economy in the world, after getting along this pathway, then it questioned it for 5 years. One wonders if it is worthwhile to make sacrifices, because sacrifices bring along costs. If you want to decarbonize, you have to spend money. I remember Giorgio Senato used to say, for ILVA we need 4 billion euros. When we find these 4 billion euros, then we will make steps forward. That's true. One needs strong financial commitment on the side of governments, companies. We cannot translate if they do not speak in the microphone. We cannot translate, unfortunately. ILVA is a political object. We are a non-political subject. We are a positive subject. We are in favor of the solution of problems. So, considering the problem of a region, a country, should be made in a positive way. We should refer to what can be done by all individuals. So, ILVA is a cancer that must be removed. We don't know how, but the world should go on. We should refer to sustainability. I am provoking my friend. Apulians have to do with Taranto, Lucanian people have to do with Taranto. Well, this conference is about what is going on in the world, not only in Apulia with Ilva. So sustainability should go towards the same direction for all. In China, they are doing big things, despite the fact that kilowatts in China are still anchored to coal. But China is doing great. Eco-industrial, the so-called eco-parks, environmental friendly parks based on industrial symbiosis, take the wastes from some production cycles and make them secondary goods for some other production cycles. So taking the waste heats from some industrial processes and turning them into fuel for boilers, responsible for the emission of dust and so on. Well, that plays a fundamental role. We should implement many projects in cities and countries and regions, and we should all be compact as one. Industrial symbiosis was born in Denmark when some smart entrepreneurs, some very careful entrepreneurs, realized that by using waste produced by their colleagues, they could curb the costs and they could achieve a considerable curb of costs in raw materials. That was the first example of industrial symbiosis in the world, in Denmark. And then similar cases were seen in China, in the United States, in Europe, in Italy. Tuscany had the project closed involving the sectors for flour production and the packagings within the framework of a circular economy for the management of special waste, industrial waste, solid urban waste. A lot can be done, and companies should be spurred and receive incentives in order to achieve these goals. Lots of investments, but a private person alone cannot do everything. And so we have support from the European Union, and so along with universities, with consulting companies, we should allow our companies to go to this direction of sustainability with all its tools. Well, now it is a crucial point for that, Mr. Ambassador, or now or never, let's say. Well, this is high time to act, as Aurelio Pichet told us with the Rome clan in the 50s. We were the first ones in the world to submit the issue of sustainability. At the time, we referred to pollution, struggle against pollution, the health of our planet and so on, which was our mistake. Well, it was too early. There were forerunners, and the role of forerunners, such as in the case of prophets, is not so favorable. As a matter of fact, they were forgotten. It took about 40 years for people to tackle that problem. And in the 90s, in the United Nations, these issues were discussed more widely. Our university, due to an intuition by Carlo Azeglio Ciampi in 1995 on an island of Venice, in the Venice Lagoon, as Dr. Conforti said, he had put together 5 universities, and we succeeded in making them become 20 universities, which was our benefit. Well, we are in a place in which you need to be aware of the problems posed by climate change. And I'm very pleased to hear during our discussions and the discussion we listened to from our screen, over the last few years, this problem, this awareness raising towards climate change and towards a more responsible attitude, the so-called accountability you mentioned before, this has become more widespread. People are talking about it. We are all more careful and cautious in what we do. And I think that our children are even more aware of that, and they could be even more, they could be the real engine for change if we allow them to feel the responsibility of being the keepers of our future. So responsibility is born within the families. Then from families, from households, it shifts to the cities. And we saw how Florence adopted many measures, and it was good to lay the stress upon these measures. They were not mandatory. But why should we do something just because something is mandatory? We could be the first ones to decide to do that. So we should be the promoters of the icebreakers for change without being obliged to do that. Then regions. We saw that the region of Puglia is a forerunner, a leader in this field. Europe goes beyond national countries and can be very helpful and support us in this shift of attitude. So Europe is becoming more and more generous towards us on these issues. But is that the case for all countries? Well, it would be a mistake to believe that these intuitions from der Leyen are widespread at a general level, because if you consider the letters she wrote in order to give charge to her commissioners, Mr. Oliver Varelli, for example, responsible for the vicinity, neighborhood policies. Well, in that case, there are whole chapters of tasks dictated for Eastern countries, which are the Eastern countries, Belarus, Moldavia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, up to the Caucasus. And no words spent for southern countries in Europe. So maybe the glance of Brussels is just directed towards the east. Is that true? Well, we've got neighbors in the east, but we've got neighbors in the south. And we do not do enough towards the south. So it will be our task of the countries on the Adriatic Sea, on the Tyrrhenian Sea, it will be our task to change this situation and this attitude towards us, so that we can be main players in this field, considering the future of our world, of our families, our smart cities, our regions that are doing a lot to achieve that aim, and our government, so that our pressure can be felt in Brussels. Because also those aids that the European Union is giving, allocating for those countries in Eastern Europe to help them in their development and to change their economy and their democratic tradition, well, the same efforts should be devoted to the south of Europe. Well, Councillor Del Re has to leave us in a few minutes. Please tell us something about these good practices you started in Florence. Well, can they be good practices in rearranging the tourist flows after the pandemic. So cities full of arts, such as Florence and Venice, will they recover their traditional hospitality so the tourists can discover our artistic beauties by putting aside other patterns of tourists which are just temporary forms of tourists, with tourists who do not overnight in these cities. That's introducing this new element. Here we are in Matera. Matera recovered its own dimension, putting an end to the injustice of its history. But an important city like Florence, well, which choices are you doing in this field? Well, the topic of sustainable tourism for Florence and other art cities in Italy and Europe plays a fundamental role. It is another challenge to face without too many tools sometimes in order to govern some phenomena which are not at the local level. For example, brief rentals of houses online that are a problem for us. Well, we are not against these platforms, but we asked Europe, and last week the Deputy President of the European Commission, Steiger, listened to us. We asked for some tools in order to limit the pathological effect brought about by some phenomena on the well-being of people in some historical city centers. Many inhabitants left our city center in the last few years because the costs of house rentals have become skyrocketing, and this is a damage of the image and the identity of the city. That's why we were finally listened to by the European Commission for that problem. We are operational for tourist flows, also availing ourselves of new technologies. In Florence, we devised a new app that can be downloaded, and it allows to identify some clustering of people in order to check in which part of the city there is a clustering of people, so that the tourists can choose to visit another part of the city at that very moment in order to enhance the beauty of our territory, not just making reference to massive tourism. We should also consider some economic categories, because we should devise a form of synergy in order to overrule this phenomenon, which is a resource on one side, but on the other side, the fact that the increase of low-quality tourism can damage some important artistic heritage, such as in the case of Florence and Matera. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know you are busy now, you have to leave us. I would like to thank you, as you suggested to meet, to organize our next meeting in Florence. Thank you so much. And we are going to continue our discussion about the foundation Advantage, sustainability and inclusion of the companies. Thank you so much. We would be delighted to host you in Florence at Palazzo Vecchio. So, Mrs. Valenzano, let's finish with you. Well, in a proactive way, I'd like to devise a kind of system, so-called PPP, that is public-private partnership, that allows us to match public demand, not only from administrations but from citizens, with the supply that well-aware, ethical entrepreneur can offer, so that supply and demand can match. This plays a fundamental role for us with the promotion of all the kinds of companies which are certified, that is joining a project such as Advantage, Foundation, Green, Sustainable, Eco-Label, regarding other types of systems, so that we can compel, if I may use that term, we should compel the production system to go towards one direction. There is lots of awareness. I was looking at some data that impressed me. And so the citizens, since 2003 up to now, increased his or her own availability to spend resources by more than 50% in favor of a more ethical economy, in favor of sustainability. So citizens are well aware today. Awareness is at the very center of our thoughts. So we have all favorable financial conditions, awareness of our lifestyles, technological systems and platforms that can be made available for companies. As I told you before, once again, the first platform available in the market relating to sustainable production and ethical production under the point of view of entrepreneurs was the one devised by Advantage.green. Let's say that. Can you join us, Tommaso, please? You cannot remain in the shadow. You're the dark, well, let's say the grey soul, not the dark soul, behind the curtains. Well, he is in the very middle of the road. There was a place, there was a seat here for him. Please tell us something, Tommaso. Well, first of all, thank you, Francesco, for this opportunity. The chance you gave me. May I? First of all, thank you for the opportunity you gave me to work with you. I have learned a lot from you over the last few days. Being dynamic, being practical, the ability to have a view towards the future. Within this framework, the view towards the future is connected with environmental sustainability, and I do hope to go along this pathway with you, with this project involving the region of Puglia, Basilicata, and now Tuscany as well. I think that you, in comparison with other people, you made a very practical step forward, because you were the first one to reach that point, and now it is up to the companies to be so mature, to have a look to the future and to get to the core of the sustainability system, because the future is connected with the quality of life as well as to the quality of the product. So we are treating the Advantage platform. I have studied very thoroughly is an amazing tool. I think that companies today are not ready to face the future, and we could be at their side. Well, I'm still waiting for to be awarded a prize for that, to receive some money for what I said. Well, it is an objective fact that considering the platform devised by President Conforti over the last few years, well, there is still a lot of room available for us. If we have a look at the reality with the eyes of the future and with the eyes of the expectations of young people, along with Greta Thunberg, you do not love particularly, but she tried to awake our awareness. I'm sorry, if they do not talk in the microphone, we cannot translate. Well, this mobilization of young people, of the youth, this makes these new prairies even more fertile for those who are going to walk along those wide prairies in the future. These are our intentions, to ride through these wide prairies of the future. Well, I'd like to add something important under an institutional point of view. The region of Puglia is very close to the project planning of your foundation on Advantage.green as well. Our awareness is connected with the view illustrated by Mrs. Valenzano. She is head of department on environment and sustainability for Region of Puglia, and we do hope we can be far-sighted towards the future. Barbara has got her specific skills for that. Public and private sector together can achieve some amazing goals. Well, now we are going to have lunch at the restaurant nearby, so you're kindly invited to join us at the restaurant for lunch. Thank you very much indeed for your kind attention. We are going to resume our works at 2:30. Thank you. Ma alla mattinata siamo sopravvissuti.
Ma i collegamenti, quelli da Firenze, tu sentivi bene quei
Non
collegamenti?
benissimo, non benissimo. Spero che per gli stranieri sia un po' meglio, se no...
No, quando c'era quella da Firenze non è che si sentisse bene.
No, c'era
vero?
dell'eco,
Ero
sì,
io.
non era, no, hai
Cioè,
ragione, non era bellissimo.
Non
sì.
si sentiva proprio chiaro.
No, per niente.
Boh, vabbè.
Faremo del nostro meglio, se no daremo sfogo alla nostra creatività.
Sì.
Che dobbiamo fare?
Infatti.